Tell me how you were planning to outrun the bullet. I mean, she's not Superman or Superwoman. Greetings, this is your host Lavinia Dathani, and in today's video we are going to be continuing on chapter 9 of the book Snowblind by author Cassie Miles. So grab yourself your cup of tea or coffee or hot cocoa and join me. Last week we found the body in a trunk covered by snow, and Sasha also disappeared. We don't know where she is, but chapter 8 ended with Brady discovering that Sasha is not in the car anymore. So chapter 9, I'm guessing we're probably going to find out where Sasha is, or just Brady trying to find her. I'm excited to see what happens next, so let's dive right into chapter 9. So chapter 9 starts with Sasha and where she is. Apparently, Miss Sasha didn't get kidnapped yet. I'm pretty sure she's gonna get kidnapped at one point, but right now she decided to get out of the vehicle because she saw a dark figure, or actually a man dressed in black, trying to skip from trees to trees in the shadow to disappear. And Miss Sasha decided it would be very cool to just follow the lead on her own and not tell anyone about it. And apparently she had the audacity to say, was I making a huge mistake? I mean, she's not a cop, she doesn't know who she's against, and she's just following a freaking dark shadow. I mean, it's kind of a mistake there, but let's see. At least she have her phone with her, which is good. She should probably use it to call Brady again, to keep trying to call him until he picks up, so that Brady doesn't freak out on the other end. Following the lead she had from seeing the shadow disappearing, Sasha wondered if she was looking at the murderer. Had he come back to the scene of the crime? Who was he? A witness? Had she actually seen anything at all? I mean, even if you had one, I would stay in the car, or at least make a note in the car and keep it. But then again, I get where she's coming from, given that, as it's said in the book, she was already, I would say, embarrassed that nobody believed her except Brady that there was a body in the hotel, and she didn't want to be the girl who cried wolf at every opportunity. She needed actual proof that she had actually seen someone, or if that someone was a murderer or a witness, or maybe just someone walking by. Who knows? And Sasha reasoned that since she wasn't going too far, she could still see the SUV from where she was. She was technically still safe and had not just run away, and she could just go back if she needed to, which she probably will need to soon. She'd gone around the front of the state patrol car in the opposite direction from where Brady and the two officers had been talking to two elderly people who resembled garden gnomes. Squinting against the sunlight reflected off the snow, she tried to see the shadowy figure again. If she didn't see him, she'd run back to the SUV and hop inside, and Brady will never know that she'd disobeyed his instruction. Too late for that, if you ask me. She should probably just look back and see Brady trying to find her. But instead, she preferred to dart across the road and hide behind a granite boulder, since at that point it had finally dawned on her that if this was a killer, she was probably in danger. So she just went there and hid and used her cell phone to try to call Brady. finally arrived at a decision. But since Brady didn't pick up from the previous chapter, remember he didn't pick up, Sasha decided that it would be wise to follow the shadowy man who was going farther away from the SUV and the crime scene. And she reasoned that if she kept a distance between herself and the killer, or whoever she was following, she ought to be safe. Then again, she could always yell for help if he ever turned around, but if they go too far, no matter how help isn't going to help her, because there's snow, and snow is known to deafen sounds, if I remember correctly. But then, while following the shadowing man, he had disappeared and she couldn't follow him anymore. But she heard a sound, but that was a bit like a motorcycle, but it was not. Apparently from the sound she could make, it appeared to be an all-terrain vehicle since there's snow, so motorcycle is not very likely here. And she asked herself if she should try to follow him, and if he would come back in her direction, which could be worrying if you ask me. But before she could make any rash decision, like she's been doing so far, she heard Brady calling her name. Then she realized that following a shadowing figure made no sense, especially if that particular shadow figure was on an ATV. Foot and ATV, he's gonna win, my dear. So it made sense that she should go back towards Brady and deal with whatever situation is or whatever is gonna happen next. Brady was standing beside his SUV, looking worn out and tired, his mouth pulled into an angry scowl with no sign of dimples. Oh, duh. Immediately, she regretted causing him to worry. I'm sorry. Where were you? I thought I saw someone sneaking around in the forest and I got out of the SUV to get a better look. Why? I was trying to be helpful. I thought maybe this guy was a witness. Or the killer, Brady said coldly. You put yourself in danger. No, I did not. She'd been cautious. I kept my distance. If he'd come around towards me, I would have had plenty of time to run back to the car. What if he had a gun? Tell me how you were planning to outrun the bullet. I mean, she's not Superman or Superwoman. And apparently it had not occurred to Sasha that the killer might be armed. And that if it was a killer, it will use a knife like he had used to kill the black-haired woman. Which, I mean, in the situation, from an outside perspective, I can say it was dumb, but in the situation they were, maybe in that moment she wasn't thinking clearly. No, maybe she was not thinking clearly in that moment, but that's the situation they are at. Sasha tried to explain that she had thought about the danger and that's why she had called Brady up, but then he didn't pick up, which is basically throwing blame, but Brady came up with the fact that he had trusted her to stay in the car, that's why he didn't pick up, because he was already busy, which apparently he shouldn't have trusted her to be in the car. And he couldn't understand why 1 minute she was scared and the next she was running around trying to track down a killer, which is two very different, I would say, personality. But then again, I feel like as a person, 1 minute you're scared, but then the next, given the situation, you will be like, I need to get more confident and then just do what needs to be done. And Sasha explained that, like before she was listening, but now she explained to Brady that since nobody believed her when she reported the crime, she was trying to get more evidence so that she could make people believe that there was a killer on the loose and it had been here. And Brady was like, okay, maybe, but I can barely understand your reasoning here. As a response, Sasha reached out Brady. However, when Brady did not respond, she dropped her hand to her side and said, for what it's worth, he was heading in that direction and I heard an engine starting up. A car engine? More like a motorcycle, she said, like an ATV. But before Brady could say anything else, the siren there and more cops' car came by. And Sasha could count at least about 5 cop vehicles. And the road was blocked on each direction. Which, if the killer had gone fast enough, he could have avoided them, but then again, if he had not, he might still be in the vicinity hiding out. With the area filling up with so many cops and law enforcement officers, Sasha felt like she didn't belong here and she didn't want to get in the way of the cops. So she just decided to walk past Brady on the way to the SUV where she would sit inside with the windows rolled up like a good little golden retriever. But when she came even with him, he caught up her arm and leaned close to talk to her. I believe you. Again, I believe you saw a man and heard an engine. When she turned her head, her face was only inches away from his. She wished with all her heart that she could be someone he trusted. You're the only one. When I saw that you weren't in the car, I was scared. His voice dropped to a whisper. If anything bad had happened to you, I'd never forgive myself. She wanted to lean a little closer and brush her lips against his. A kiss, even a quick kiss, wasn't acceptable behavior, but she couldn't help the yearning that was building inside her. Do you want me to go back in that car? I want you where I can see you. Stay with me. If you guys remember from the very first video for this book, this part here was from the prologue. And now it makes more sense to me than it did when I first read it, but it's still good. Having worked at the firm, Sasha was accustomed to dealing with very rich people, with people who was a big shot or was even a bit rude, and she was used to being firm with them, to shake their hand and then just slowly vanishing to the background. So she took the time to speak with the sheriff, Ted McKinley, and just when Brady introduced her to deal with what was happening, and she could tell from Brady's and the deputy's behavior, Brady and the sheriff's behavior, that they didn't hate each other, but they didn't particularly like each other, while Brady oozed of a cool, easy confidence, someone you will want in a situation of crisis. The sheriff was somewhat all rigid with the uniform from top to bottom, and whenever he was nervous, he threw his mustache, and Sasha could tell that he was a bit unsure of himself and he didn't actually know how to deal with this thing. Taking care of business like usual, Brady filled in the sheriff about how his body resembled Lauren Robbins from the ID picture, so now they had the body. They knew actually who it was for sure, given the picture. But then when Brady asked if they had already done the background check like he had asked, the sheriff informed him that not yet, because he didn't want to lose resources and they didn't actually have proof. So since they had limited resources in a small town, he didn't want to spend time on something that could eventually not pan out. And from Brady's expression, his jaw tensing, Sasha and us as a reader can see that Brady was angry and he wanted to lash out, but instead he was professional and decided to hold back his anger, especially since the sheriff was causing them to lose time to find out the killer. But then again, I think politics, and they didn't actually have proof, so at the same time, protocol dictated that they had to actually confirm the body in another way, such as fingerprint. So the sheriff had sent other police officers to use a mobile fingerprint scanner to try to identify the body and make sure it was really Lauren Robbins. And while they were doing that, more cops' car came in, which meant that the state patrol was coming in, probably, which kind of made the sheriff a bit angry because there was apparently too many cooks in the picture, and as they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. So Sasha said that he needed to take charge, but at the same time, right now, he was not taking charge. Rather, he was much more likely to be complaining or just letting other people do the job. And apparently he had something against Uncle Judy because he had advised to Judy that the ski lodge was a bad idea because with it it's gonna bring in more crime. And this was proven with a murder in the time in their town, when the crime rate was pretty much nothing before the ski lodge. And now they were waiting for the expert forensic investigators that was going to be loaned to them by the state police. They were also waiting for the coroner and the mountain rescue so they can bring up the steamer trunk with the body. Looking at Sasha, the sheriff asked her if she worked for Damian Loughlin, which she responded with a yes. Then Mr. Sheriff said that for her to not worry, or told her to tell Damian to not worry because he had everything under control. But looking at the crime scene and how everything is going, I would say not really under control. And even Sasha had the same opinion that everything was not in control. The situation at the crime scene was teetering on the brink of chaos. Stepping forward, Brady informed the sheriff that he would like to follow another lead. Covering for Sasha, he said that he heard an ATV starting up and he was going to follow that lead, which the sheriff allowed. And said maybe they could find a witness and see where everything else goes. Directing Sasha with him towards his SUV, Brady and her got inside and started to drive away, which was a relief for Sasha because The state patrolmen, the deputies, the siren, and the flashing lights created a wall of confusion between her and the truth. A woman had died in a horrible way. Like it or not, Sasha was part of that death. She needed to make sense of the terrible thing that had happened, to fit that piece into the puzzle of her life. And with everything happening around, I'm pretty sure she still didn't have time to wrap her head around it. Alone with Brady, she relaxed in the thinking that now she was safe and Brady would protect her no matter what. Making small conversation, Sasha talked about the sheriff, his attitude, and how he was probably not equipped for a murder investigation, but then again, Brady was also as inexperienced as anybody in the town, which at the same time gave the sheriff a higher position because apparently he had more experience than any of them, even though it was not in the murder field. But Sasha found it hard to believe that Brady had never done anything like investigating a murder before, since last night he had approached everyone with an unshakable authority and asked all the right questions, which made Sasha think about whether Brady would like to be a sheriff in the future, which she asked him, and he replied with a simple, I just want everybody to be safe, or I just want the town to be safe, and that was it for his response. Having arrived at the location where Sasha heard the sound, they realized that they were not really equipped to go searching for evidence. If they were real homicide detectives, Brady said that he would have already sent 6 forensic experts to comb the hill for clues and track down the SUV. But since all they have is Brady and Sasha, they couldn't really do that. So they settled for going to a ranch that was not too far from there, where there was someone who had several ATVs. So they were gonna start there, which Sasha was grateful for because she didn't really want to do unnecessary hiking in her business suit and boots with chunky heels, since she wasn't really dressed to be tramping around in the snow and doing all the hikes. And the dude who was in the ranch was an old friend of Uncle Judy's, who was also in favor of development, since the town was basically divided in pro-development against development, and those against development was not really, didn't really like Uncle Judy because he had brought the hotel in town. And as Brady said, change is necessary. Slow water turns stagnant, which is true. If you don't change, there's a lot of things you cannot do in life. There's always evolve. You always have to evolve in life. On the way to the dude ranch, Sasha was mesmerized by the beauty of the landscape, the horse by the ranch, and the ATVs going down the hill, and just the mountain took her breath away since she was a city girl and did not get to see such beautiful and wide landscape before. Brady, on the other hand, was used to this landscape. As a kid, he used to help out with the horses at this ranch, at this particular ranch. And he had a secret hideout in this area as well, which he was bringing Sasha to. The area was dotted with hot spring and artificial pools. that was the area that was close to the cave that they were guessing they are going now, instead of going to the ranch to talk to that guy to get more evidence. And since this was basically unexpected, since Brady until now have been straightforward and all business, she asked Brady, why are we going to the cave? He turned to face her and said that he needed to catch his breath, which kind of confused Sasha because she wasn't really sure what he meant by that. Brady pointed out that he needed to slow down and just so that he could think. There was a lot of things going on, and he just needed to take a breath and just think what was happening and what he could do next. Pointing at the dark shadow against the rock face, Brady pointed to the entrance of the cave, which was hidden. If Sasha hadn't been as close to the slit of the cave, she wouldn't have noticed the opening, which makes a very good hideout. Wedging herself through the entry, she felt Brady's hand on her arm as he pulled her forward and halted. The ceiling was just high enough for him to stand upright, and the air was thick and moist, and the more they went inside, the warmer it was, which suggested a hot spring, but Brady explained that it wasn't really a hot spring because the temperature inside was a steady 53 degrees summer or winter. Standing inside the cave, Brady told Sasha to just listen, as she cocked her ears, and she heard nothing but the beating of her own heart. It was the perfect silence. Hold on to me. Brady wrapped his arm around her. I'm going to turn off the flashlight. She slipped her hand inside his jacket and pressed against him. Absolute darkness wrapped around them. And that's it for chapter 9. I hope you enjoyed it. We can see that Sasha and Brady are getting closer, and I don't know what's gonna happen inside the cave, but let's see in the next chapter for the next video, and let's see if they find any other clues as far as the ATV goes. And please do not forget to like, subscribe, or turn the bell notification if you like this video. And until next time, big kisses.